Hi, I'm Natalie Murray, the author of Emmy and the Tudor King and Emmy and the Tudor Queen. This question is from start to finish, what does my writing process look like? Okay, well, when I start a book, I usually plot it out. I am a plotter rather than a pantser, but I usually only plot the first half in any great detail, and then I leave the second half loosely plotted because by that point in the writing, I tend to deviate from whatever I've come up with originally a little bit more in the second half. I always know the ending though, so before I start a novel, the first thing I will begin with is the ending. And I don't mean the writing, I mean the plotting. So I know my ending, then I come up with my first chapter basically from there, and then I create the arc to get from start to finish. And how does my writing process work when I'm actually drafting? I'm pretty disciplined. I've learnt to be, otherwise nothing gets done. And I tend to write sort of 500 to 800 words a day. I find once I get past, let's say, the 1,000 mark, it all starts going downhill and the creativity is sort of depleted by that point. So I'll write little by little every day, maybe take the odd weekend day off for a bit of a mind break. And then when I get to the end of the first draft, which usually takes a few months, then I'll go back and revise and polish, and I'll probably do 2 or 3 drafts before I'll send it to an editor. And then my editor will have a look at it and we'll send back lots of ideas for the structural edit. So we'll look at character development and story arc and all the different ways we can improve that and get that to the best it can be. So there's quite a bit of rewriting for the big picture, more major surgery. And then the final draft is the line edit or the copy edit. So we go sentence by sentence and just make sure that everything's making sense, that everything's written the best it can be. And then a final proofread and the book is done. Okay, what drew me to write about Tudor England? I've been a Tudorphile for as long as I can remember. I remember being a little girl and reading storybooks set in the medieval to the Renaissance period of Europe. So I've always been interested in that sort of Middle Ages to Renaissance period, but particularly the Tudors, because once I discovered the story of Henry VIII and his 6 wives, 2 of whom he executed, I thought, wow, this is more dramatic than a storybook. So I just delved more into that once I discovered an interest in that family. And then when I read about his 3 children to different mothers, I thought, wow, this is like a soap opera, but all this really happened, 400 years ago. So I found that really, really fascinating. And then I just started reading more about the period and watching TV shows and movies, and the costumes were really intriguing. And I just couldn't believe that so much of the reality of that period is true. When you really look into it, it is one of the most dramatic periods in British history. And I knew that one day I would like to write a story set in that time period purely for the excuse to research it, which turned out to be a lot more work than I thought it would be going in. Okay, what kind of research did I do to bring the authenticity to the books? I am a perfectionist. Everything in the book is very well researched. I would hate to know if I got things wrong. So it is as accurate as I could get it. And what I did to do that was I read a lot of books about the time period, about Tudor England and Elizabethan England, because both my books are set in 1580 to 1581, which in reality was the rule of Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth I. So I read a lot about both the Tudor and the Elizabethan eras. I interviewed historians, and I also went to England to do a research trip last year to write Emmy and the Tudor Queen, which was fantastic because most of Emmy and the Tudor King is set at the Palace of Whitehall, which is no longer standing. So I looked at maps of the old palace. I read as much as I could find about it, and then I created the story world from there. Whereas I knew that Emmy and the Tudor Queen would be set predominantly at Hampton Court Palace, which is still standing. And so I thought, if I'm going to write about it, I have to go there and walk the halls, even though it's had numerous modifications since it was a Tudor palace. So I did a tour there, a private tour with a historian who explained which part is Tudor and which part is not. And then I went to Kenilworth, the ruins of Kenilworth Castle, and Stratford upon Avon, where Shakespeare's from, which was an Elizabethan time. So there was a lot of research involved. Probably as many hours was spent on research than was spent on writing the book. If I could have dinner with any author, living or dead, who would it be? Oh my gosh, this is so hard because there are so many I would like to say. For me, I think it's going to be a toss-up between, toss-up between Enid Blyton and Charlotte Bronte. I grew up with Enid Blyton. Her Folk of the Faraway Tree series I just devoured when I was little, and the Adventures of Moonface, Silky, and the Folk of the Faraway Tree have stayed with me for such a long time. I read that series recently to my own children, and I think that story inspired my imagination more than any other during my formative years. But also Charlotte Bronte, because Jane Eyre just had such an impact on me as a novel. And it's more than a romance, but the romance between Jane Eyre and Rochester was so moving to me and full of that sort of exquisite angst and passion that I look for when I try to capture when I write romance. So, I can't choose. Can I please have dinner with both of them? A favorite underappreciated book of mine, I'm going to say The Bronze Horseman by Paulina Simons. And I don't think it's particularly unappreciated. I think it has a lot of fans. But I have come across comments before that it's not literary enough and that it's a little bit sort of more paperback romance style. And I just want to say that book had such an effect on me as a writer of romance. So if you're not familiar with it, it's a trilogy, but The Bronze Horseman is the first book in the trilogy, and it's a story of a young couple who meet in Russia during the Second World War, and the romance that blossoms between these two, this sort of star-crossed, two worlds colliding, cannot be romance, is the sort of high stakes drama that I look for in romance, which is quite evident in the Emmy and the Tudor King and Emmy and the Tudor Queen series, because I have a romance between a couple from two different time periods, so it can't get more difficult than that. So I just love The Bronze Horseman so much. I am still waiting for it to be turned into a film or a TV series. At least once a year I check IMDb to see what's happening, because apparently it's in development and then it's not in development and I don't know what's happening. So check that book out if you haven't read it and if you love romance. It's really beautiful. Something special about the Hearts and Crowns series, or a hidden fact. There's a few little tidbits. One is that the idea for the book came to me in a dream. So in my dream, I was Emmy in this chamber, opulent sort of living room of a young Tudor king. And it wasn't Henry VIII. It was a king that I hadn't seen before. So I had this random dream one night that I was a girl from the future. I wasn't from that time period. I was visiting for the day this boyfriend of mine who happened to be a Tudor king, and it just seemed so bizarre, but it was very, very real. And I've written other stories before that came to me in dreams. It seems to be a good way for me to find ideas. And another little tidbit is that in Emmy and the Tudor King, there was an original villain who changed. So I don't want to give too many spoilers away about who the villain turns out to be in Emmy and the Tudor King. But if you have read, or if you know anything about the books, you'll know there is a character called Francis, and he is a very important character. He is the best friend of Nick, the Tudor King, and he was originally my villain. So I had plotted everything out that Francis was going to be the murderer and it was going to be this trick, and I started writing, and for some reason that character did not want to be the villain. It was like something he just took over my soul, and he said, it's not me. I'm telling you, I'm hot-headed, and I can be brutal, and I can be mean, and I'm really charismatic, which are all these fun layers you can bring to a villain. He said, but I didn't do this. And so I went, okay, you didn't do it. I had to come up with someone else. Yeah, so that was another little one. And what else? I guess that I have always planned out a 3-book story. So I already know how book 3 is going to end, because as I said, I always start with the ending. And if I do write a book 3, it's going to be pretty fun as well. How do I take my tea? Great question. Well, I'll start by saying that I am a coffee girl. This is my coffee mug with the first lines of famous novels on it, which I had to buy when I saw it. But I do drink tea as well, and I am very English tea drinker. English breakfast with 1 sugar and milk.